to the Sitcom Archive Deep Dive Overdrive, or SADDO for short. We are back. We are back with a vengeance, with a new series to deep dive from the 1970s, and this time we are on Fawlty Towers.
Now then, yes we are indeed. Fawlty Towers it is, and I'm pretty excited to be getting stuck into it now.
We are indeed. I am your co-host, Alison Barton-Simmons.
Oh yeah, I'm Eggs Benedict. Hello. So this series is Fawlty Towers, and we'll be looking at a different episode of Fawlty Towers, which ran on the BBC, 75 to 79, across 12 short episodes. That's all there is of Fawlty Towers, sadly. But like last series, you can listen along with us. You can watch the original episode. It's all over the place, being Fawlty Towers is one of the most popular sitcoms ever. What, is it on BritBox, this one, or is it on Netflix?
I've watched it on the BBC iPlayer. It's all there on the iPlayer to watch.
Oh, cool, okay. And
which is great and easy.
Just like last season as well, we are embedding the episode from Dailymotion that some naughty person uploaded onto our own website. So you can watch the episode on our website and then listen to the podcast on the same page on our website if you'd like to do that. But just, watch along and listen along with us and join in the fun and send us messages about what we've missed and little tidbits and get involved, basically.
Yeah, anything that you can think of, just let us know. Just let us know, because we'd love to hear from people that are listening along with us and watching along with us. This first episode of Fawlty Towers was in September 1975. And it's we were saying last week, weren't we, that it feels like a series that was around for so much longer than it actually was. Because of the gap between the two series, and because it's just everywhere, isn't it? Everyone knows Fawlty Towers, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, as we said last week, it's been redone so many times in so many different countries. It's just an institution.
I think it is. It's part of the makeup of the UK, I think, isn't it?
And John Cleese's pension fund, basically,
yes,
is what it is.
Indeed.
And you mentioning that this was on in September 75. I think in the episode we see him filling in a Pools coupon from 74, which must have been when it was filmed.
Ah, right, okay.
And I haven't got a gain this week. We will bring back Your Les Trousers, and we will bring back Brucey, I think, in this series.
Yes, please.
But this week I just wanted to point out a few parallels or shared connections between Fawlty Towers and The Good Life.
Right. That's a good place to start, isn't it? I like that.
Yeah. As you can see, I'm bereft to let The Good Life go. I keep bringing it up every episode. I miss The Good Life. So firstly, we didn't mention last week, but John Howard Davies is the director of this show, and he also directed and produced The Good Life.
Oh, see, I like that. That's a good link.
It is. And if you think about it, the first episode of The Good Life was on in 75 also, April the 4th, 75. And then this was on September the 9th, 75. And as we said just before, was filmed in 74. I like to imagine John Howard Davies driving from, it wasn't Torquay, was it? It was somewhere in Gloucestershire or something, was it? Buckinghamshire.
Was it not in Buckinghamshire? So driving between Buckinghamshire and Surbiton, but not Surbiton.
But not Surbiton.
Surbiton.
Yeah.
Just driving from all these fictional places, which I know they're real, but fictional TV places.
Yeah, he's basically having to source a branch for Basil to hit a car in one place and then source a goat to take up the road in another place.
God, he must have been so busy, that man.
Yeah. So there you go. Obviously, we mentioned last week that Prue Scales was in Marriage Lines with Richard Pryor. So.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing, particularly about this first episode that we're going to deep dive today, is that Terence Connolly, do you know who that is?
That name rings. I've seen that name this week.
He is the guy in this episode who desperately wants a gin and lemon,
an
orange squash, and a scotch and water. Please.
Yes, please.
Do you recognise him from anything else?
I did. Do you know what? I recognised his face, but I couldn't place him, and I didn't find out. I didn't sort of Google him.
Well,
go on, who is he?
I'll give you a clue. Oh shit! I've forgotten the name of the episode. What was it called? Suit Yourself from The Good Life.
Right. Yeah. Is that where they have the suits
made of green? Yeah.
They wear the suits when they go down and interrupt.
Yes.
The meeting about the new boss.
Yeah, and the three candidates were Jerry and Mr.
Snetterton
and Donald Dalby, the dull guy.
Was he Dalby?
Yeah, he was Dalby. Sat there with his wife, who was presumably drinking an orange squash while he had his Scotch and water.
Yeah, see, it was such a small world, I think, in 1970s sitcoms, really, weren't it?
Well, so much so that Cleese reused him again in 79 in a different episode of this as another character.
Really?
He's in Waldorf Salad, a later episode that we'll come to. So there you go.
Considering that there was only a few episodes, sort of 12, if you were a massive fan of Fawlty Towers, you'd reckon that. I'm sure you'd spot that's the shouty man who wanted the scotch.
Possibly.
Okay.
I think the worst example of reusing an actor in the same universe, maybe not same show, is when they did the Friends spin-off, Joey.
Yeah.
And they had a recurring character who was played by the same guy who played Eddie, who moved in with Chandler.
Oh, no!
You know, when Joey moved out in Friends.
Yeah.
They had Eddie as I think it was like his... somebody's brother. He was a recurring character. And I was like, why the fuck is Eddie in it? And why is he now not a nutter? Because he was a total nutter, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like it when they do that, really. But I suppose you can get away with it in Fawlty Towers when they're just guests. You know, 2 or 3 lines. Well, in fact, it's one line in this for Terence Connolly. It's just repeating the same line while he tries to get his drinks in vain. So there you go. There's the parallels. A few little connections between The Good Life and Fawlty Towers. I promise I will try and leave The Good Life in the past and not keep harking back to it. But I thought that was interesting.
Let it go, Ben.
I will. I'll try.
So, as with every episode, we start at the sign, the Fawlty Towers sign, the infamous Fawlty Towers sign at the front of the hotel. And this being the first episode, the only sort of thing that's happening with the sign is that the S is sort of falling off at the end, which does give us a bit of insight into the state of mind of the hotel in general, I think, once we get inside. And obviously this became like a signature thing for Fawlty Towers, that the sign outside was fiddled about with, and it was by the newspaper boy, wasn't it, that we find out that he's the one that's fiddling about with all the letters and then does a runner.
I don't know if we ever do find that out, or it's just lore that people think that.
Is it?
Or maybe Cleese revealed it. I don't know if it's ever actually revealed. Oh, okay. No, you're right. No, sorry, I stand corrected. You do see him do it in one episode, you're right.
So he's doing it all along. But so the opening episode, it's just the S. The S is just hanging off a little bit. We're inside of the hotel in the reception, and it's all quite calm at the start. It's leading you into, like, with a false sense of security that this is just every other normal hotel. This is a really weird thing to say, but I can smell the hotel when I see them opening credits. I can smell it. I know what that hotel smells like.
I hesitate to ask what it smells like.
I know that that's a sort of it's like a musty, burnt toast smell.
Oh, lingering smells of breakfast.
Breakfast and must, I think, is what I can smell when I see them opening scenes. Basil is in need of preparing a bill for a couple that are leaving, and they didn't get their alarm call, apparently. So it all gets very flustered very quickly, I think, doesn't it?
It does, but I quite like the fact that they start off with a really strong joke almost immediately with Manuel when he's coming out and he says, "There's too much butter on those trays."
It's brilliant. Such a good setup.
Yeah.
Manuel, there's too much butter on those trays.
Okay.
There is too much butter on those trays.
No, senor.
What?
Not on those trays. No, sir. Uno, dos, tres.
He obviously, as you know, a very strong comedic background, he knows start with a corker of a joke, you know. And there's immediate exposition, isn't there, about how you're wondering why is this guy even working in a hotel when he can't speak English, and then he's cheap. And I also read, I didn't mention last week, but I also read that apparently there were loads of Europeans employed in and around London in the mid-70s, in the same way that Poles were lambasted in the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. To save on costs, I mean, it's much like now, but often they didn't speak English. So you get, apparently, lots of Europeans, particularly Spaniards, working. I mean, London's always full of different ethnicities anyway, but apparently it was a really big thing at that time.
Oh, right.
So that's why he was written in.
Okay. Basil had told Sybil as well that he could speak the language, so it was all fine to have Manuel from Barcelona to come and work with them. But yeah, Basil, there is it's lost in translation, isn't it? It really is. With the uno, dos, tres joke. But it really made me laugh. I think seeing it sort of quite fresh, that joke really tickled me because when you've seen it before, you can see it coming a mile off. But I think when you've not seen it for a long time or you've never seen it before, it is such a good.
It's a strong joke to start with.
It stood the test of time as well. The introduction to Sybil, I think, in this opening scene, I'm already. It's already grating on me. It really is.
Don't like
the
her,
Sybil
do you?
character. I don't like her.
She's your
I don't
Tom
like
Good.
her. Oh, when she's just there saying, "What's the matter?" And it made me laugh that he went, "Nothing, dear. I'm just dealing with it." Meaning Manuel, which I thought he just almost like swats her away, like just keep your fucking nose out. Sorry. And that's how I feel about her throughout. I do feel at this early stage that a lot of these issues wouldn't happen if Sybil just kept her nose out.
Yeah, she's immediately set up as this incessant nag, isn't she?
Oh,
and a pain in Basil's arse.
Yeah.
But you also see quite quickly that he's terrified of her. So like, a little bit
Yes.
later on, without getting ahead of ourselves, he wants 5 minutes, doesn't he, to put his music on and grab a piece of toast, and he hears her coming and he pushes it away, and
The panic.
he's so
the
scared
panic
of
when
her.
he throws it into the bureau almost.
Yeah.
Back in reception, Miss Gatsby and Miss Tibbs, who we find out are like long-term residents, aren't they, at the hotel?
Before they move into Nelson Mandela House, yeah.
before they move into a different show, randomly. They come down the stairs. They are spinsters in the late 70s, and there's quite a bit of internet discussion around this couple being a couple.
Really?
In the 70s, like a hidden couple, yeah.
There's no signs of that, is there?
That there's not. But there is discussion that they are just an elderly lesbian couple.
I think the Major's having it away with both of them
Do you?
at the same time.
Well, that's a different dynamic, isn't it?
He's reading out the cricket scores while giving them one from behind.
Right, okay.
Sorry, I'm lowering the tone. Carry on.
Sybil's back again, mithering about getting this picture hung up on the wall. This is the sort of one of the focal points of the episode. It's that this picture needs to be hung on the wall. But then she just keeps coming back in and saying, "Have you done the menu? Have you hung the picture?" And he's like just striding between these two things that he needs to do.
Yeah.
When she's sort of insistent that one is more important than the other.
And he's also trying to serve breakfast. At the same time, he's in the breakfast room and giving the Major his papers, which have arrived late.
Oh,
yeah, he's the poor guy's. I'm beginning to come around to what you said last week already. That even though he is a bit of an arse, as we see in every episode, perhaps he wouldn't be so bad if he was just given a moment's peace and quiet.
Yeah, just to think, just have a moment to think. So the couple that didn't get the alarm call, which is Basil's fault by all the sort of sideways glances, I assumed it was Basil's fault. He stops hanging the picture and then he runs back over to sort out the bill. And she even asks him in front of the customers, "Why did you not do it, Basil?" And then he has this like massive explosion of, "Because I forgot. I just forgot."
Yeah.
And I just feel like he's doing his best. But she's always there to point out what he's not quite done properly.
I am from Barcelona.
Next, we're in the dining room, and he's delivering the papers that have just been dropped off by the cheeky paper boy. And he gives the Major his paper, and they discuss the strikes. It sort of sets the tone for like the political tone of the Major and Basil.
Yeah,
they're talking about strikes, and Basil's insistent that we should just be doing stuff for fellow men, which just feels a bit alien to what we know about Basil so far. In this dining room scene as well, there's lots of people that are needing of Basil's attention. So there's one guy that only wants to stay till Sunday, so he's like shouting out to Basil while Basil's busy doing something else. And he gets quite snappy at this stage, Basil. He's a little bit on his high horse, I think. Just trying to keep everybody. All he wants to do is, like you say, is go and have this piece of toast, sit in his back office with music on. And
put a bit of Brahms on. Brahms' third racket, as he describes it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But he just keeps getting interrupted by pesky customers. And back at the bureau, like you said, he hears Sybil coming and he throws his breakfast into the bureau. So he doesn't get told off. He just doesn't want to he wants a quiet life, does Basil.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to get done.
But when she comes in, she's already got something else to complain about. She's complaining about the cost of the advert that he's placed in Country Life for 40 quid.
Yeah.
Which again, you're getting this exposition that he's a snob, that he basically wants to attract a better clientele to the hotel. She doesn't see why. And I'm on her side with that because it's just a load of nonsense.
He pays the bills.
Yeah. And he's wasted 40 quid, which is a lot of money in those days, of course, putting this advert in, and he's got one booking from it. And she points out sort of passive-aggressively that it won't even pay for the advert.
And then to illustrate sort of Sybil's point, Danny Brown turns up, and he's a bit of a what we assume to be a bit of a Cockney wide boy with his leather jacket on, and he's hello, got a room.
Yeah,
you can tell that as an actor, this guy doesn't actually speak like that, but he sort of puts on the Cockney wide boy.
Did you get Lenny Godper vibes off him?
Yes, I did a little bit with the way that he was almost like he was sort of using that as inspiration for the way that he spoke. Yes, I did.
Although I suppose it would have predated Porridge, would it? Oh no, it was been about the same time.
And the hair.
The hair, definitely.
That sort of 70s blow dried.
Yeah.
Bouffant.
I'm sure you'll mention his jacket later, which I thought was great.
I will. I'd love that jacket. Anyway, I digress. Basil tries to put him off. No, like as if he'd not got any rooms. But Sybil's like, yeah, just let him in. What are you doing? We need this guy to pay the bills.
But he's embarrassed, isn't he, at this point, because of the fact that he assumes that Mr. Brown's a troglodyte. He doesn't think he'll even be able to write, and then it turns out he speaks fluent Spanish and starts conversing with Manuel.
He has a bit of a chat with Manuel, but that it really does. It pisses Basil off that because he says like, "Oh well, why don't you tell Manuel?" Seeing as though he understands everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
Again, he hears Sybil and races off, shouting, and she shouts, "Don't forget the menu!" So she's still pecking him about getting the menu done, and he manically starts trying to put the menu together. In the dining room again, we've got Mr. Brown who is shouting after Basil, waiter, and he wants the wine list, and there's a bit of an altercation with a grapefruit that ends up flying across the dining room.
I thought it was just like a bread roll. Was it a grapefruit? Was it?
Because he orders the grapefruit.
I didn't get it right, but whatever it was okay. It was the way that Basil saying throw it away and then miming throwing something away, and then is the way Andrew Sachs does it without even looking. He's sort of looking in one direction and just throws it. It lands on that table. I thought that still makes me laugh, that scene.
And then we have what becomes the first in many instances of Manuel getting a bit of a beating from Basil.
Yeah.
He gets taken into the kitchen.
We should have a violence tab in this one, do you think?
I think, yeah, you can chalk that one up, definitely.
Yeah.
There's a ring and there's somebody in reception, but Sybil shouts, "There's somebody in reception." Again, it really irritated me that if you can shout that there's somebody in reception, just go and see what it is.
Well, in a short while, we see that even when he pops out to get Lord Melbury's cases, she then takes over and finishes it off. And he's like,
yes.
Well, why'd you ask, you can see him thinking, why'd you ask me to do it? And then you do it yourself.
Yeah.
She's just infuriated, isn't she?
I do feel that a lot of his manic status and just the fact that he's sort of always on the ceiling, I understand. I get it.
Yeah. But do you think that Lord Melbury turns up almost looking like the archetypal cad?
Of course he does, with his little moustache and he's very neat, and he's got his navy overcoat on, and
he's carrying a bowler hat.
He looks like an MP. He looks like an archetypal MP.
Or I mean, you would definitely see Nigel Havers playing him now if it was remade. Yeah,
absolutely, you would, and I can imagine that is what draws Basil in straight away, because he looks at people and thinks, yeah, you're the real deal.
How far away do you think Terry Thomas was from landing that part?
Oh, it's a Terry Thomas role, that, isn't it? Yeah. Terry Thomas and Nigel Havers, yeah.
Did you know that the guy who played Lord Melbury, Michael Gwynn, apparently died 4 months after this episode aired?
Oh, no.
Very young, yeah. Poor dude.
Wowzers.
Maybe it was that kick that Basil gives him at the end.
Maybe it was. Oh, dear. Yeah. Or maybe not.
Let's hope not.
Sort of. Yeah.
You bastard!
the way that Basil responds to having a lord when he realises, because he's on the phone to Mr. O'Reilly, the builder, initially.
Yeah, foreshadowing next episode, isn't it?
Oh, he's giving Mr. O'Reilly what for, and he's sort of semi-racist in this call, sort of saying that we've got a pile of bricks. Have you not tried to come and cement them? And then there's a mention of the potato famine. But then when he realises that Lord Melbury is a lord, and the impact that his advert in Country Life might have had, he just tells Mr. O'Reilly to go away on the phone and puts it down.
Yeah.
And that really made me laugh. That he then sort of turns his attention to Lord Melbury, and he says snivelling, horrible arse liquor.
Yeah, the sycophancy he shows to Lord Melbury after he hangs up on O'Reilly.
Yes.
It's the dichotomy between being obnoxious to O'Reilly and then click of fingers, and he's all what's his, at one point he says naturellement.
Oh, it's really cringy, but I love it. I love the fact how far he will go and how quick. Yeah, that just shows.
He calls him Your Honour,
manic,
and he's maniacal in his toading, isn't he, to Melbourne? Yes, yeah,
absolutely. So he calls for Manuel to go and get his bags, but then ends up saying, "No, don't bother, I'll do it," and then runs outside to get the bags himself.
I don't get this thing where people. I mean, I'm assuming this isn't just TV land. I'm assuming it used to happen and probably still does. I don't stay in nice hotels because I'm a pauper. Basil wouldn't want me in his hotel, so I'm not posh enough. But why do people go up the steps, dump their bags outside a hotel where presumably they could be nipped by anyone, and then go in? I mean, why didn't you just bring him in with him? Maybe
that was a thing in...
Must have been.
In sort of like earlier decades that you did. Was it expected that someone would bring your cases in? Was that part of the deal?
I think it's a class thing. Again, it's like, it's beneath me. I'll get a paid monkey to do it. Like Manuel.
I don't like it though. I remember at my wedding where at the hotel, which you were at as well, and when we pulled up in the car, they took my cases off me. They took my bag off me, and it really flummoxed me. I didn't like it. It felt, and it was all part of the experience of being at this hotel. You pull up, we take your cases, we put them on one of them brass carriages, and we push it into the hotel. And it's like, no, I'll just carry it. And maybe it is a class thing. It felt alien. It felt really strange.
Did your DVU or Johnny put a nice crisp £10 note in the guy's?
Oh God!
In the guy's lapel.
That's what it feels like. It feels like the expectation of, I don't know what to do in those situations. Yeah. Is that what was supposed to happen? Was I supposed to crush a crisp £10 note into his hand?
Here you go.
Just for carrying
Buy
my
yourself
bag
a drink, Sam. That type of thing.
Oh, it's weird. I don't like things like that. No. I don't like when I don't know what the expectation is. I'd rather just do it myself than I know that it's all right. But that's just me.
No, I agree with you completely.
Lord Melbury wants to deposit some cases of valuables. Yes. So obviously Basil thinks, oh, geez, this is someone that I need to stay on the best side of and impress. So he wants to take the cases and put them into the safe. Basil and Manuel end up fighting over the cases. I don't know if you noticed in this scene as well that before they go upstairs, Lord Melbury's sort of like sneaking around a little bit in the reception.
Oh, was
rather
he?
than just following Basil up the stairs. He seems to almost like he's casing the joint a little bit.
Oh,
like
no, I didn't pick up on that.
Peeping, yeah.
Okay.
So straight away I'm thinking, ooh,
he's a wrong
a bit dodgy here. He's a wrong un.
Oh, I know.
So after getting settled in, Lord Melbury heads into the dining room for lunch, and the table, which Basil refers to as being Lord Melbury's table, but I don't think Lord Melbury's even been before. There's a family sat in the window in like a bay window seat, and he turfs this family away into a different seats across the dining room, which results in Lord Melbury falling on the floor because Basil is so keen to pull his chair out and be polite. But as Lord Melbury sits down, Basil just removes the chair and he falls on the floor.
Yeah, bit of classic slapstick there, really, wasn't it?
I liked it, yeah. Basil's very apologetic and offers Lord Melbury free dinner, but Lord Melbury's already got plans to go out and indeed needs a cheque cashing. So this was this like an old way of getting money?
I think it probably was a done.
Done.
Yeah, probably a done thing to just say, "Oh,
you
I
give
need
a cheque
advance
and
cash." Yeah,
it gets cashed at the bank, and then you get £200 out, or whatever amount.
Yeah.
So he wants £200. He fills a check in and asks if Basil can head down to the bank to cash this for him later on that evening.
I think Basil offered 100, did he? I can't remember now. Did
Yes.
Basil offer 100? He said, well, is 100 enough? 100, 150, 160? He said, well, it's the weekend.
Yeah.
200. And you can see by his face that he's mortified at being asked for 200 sovs. But at the same time, he's like, I'm so happy. Of course.
Yeah.
That line, I'm so happy, made me laugh quite a bit.
He goes higher and higher up, doesn't he? He gets more and more manic.
Yeah. Well, I can understand it because the equivalent, like we've done in the first series where we worked out the equivalent amount of money, this is equivalent to about £1,000 in today's money is what he's asking for. I mean, that's a lot of money for a weekend, isn't it?
For a night out,
You get a good weekend for £1,000.
Absolutely. Sybil sort of takes it upon herself to tell Basil off for moving the family and for Lord Melbury falling over as well. And sort of points out that Lord Melbury's cases are very tatty. So she's sort of
she's on the ball.
drawing the conclusion that is that really how a lord would sort of be kitted out? Whereas Basil says, of course, this is what all the upper classes are like. They don't care. They don't need to have the best looking accessories. Of course, he's got a tatty case.
He's almost caught out in this scene by Sybil writing the cheque, and he pushes it away like he did with his toast earlier. And then to cover it, he gives her a peck on the cheek, and she says, "What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Just giving you a kiss, dear." Well, don't. That's another telltale sign of a very stilted marriage, isn't it?
Yeah. I think the single beds side by side is also an indication later on in the series. Basil sends Polly into the town to get the cheque cashed. And we see it's a high street shot. It's an outdoors high street.
I knew you'd love this bit.
On location shot. I liked it. So as she's sort of like wandering down the street, she sees Mr. Brown, who's staying at the hotel. The guy that Basil thought was some Cockney wide boy. And she sees Mr. Brown in the car. But then this feels quite an alien concept now. She just gets in the car with him. She just gets in the back of the car.
It wouldn't happen now, would it? You'd be on your toes, pretty girl about town, and he just beckons her into the car. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But she gets in and he's obviously whispering something to her. And we see Lord Melbury coming out of the jewellers in the high street. So the plot thickens at this point.
And at this point, Alison, did you notice that there was like almost the Fawlty Towers equivalent of the brass tone happened?
Yes. I did.
There was like a swoop, wasn't it? As he came out, there was a swoop. But instead of a brass tone, it was like an off-kilter piano chord. It's like, this isn't right, because there's a minor chord where it was previously it was like a funked up version of the theme tune, wasn't it? Played on piano rather than on fiddle. But as soon as Melbury comes out, you get a swoop, and then you get a minor chord, and it's like, oh, aye, aye.
Watch out for this.
I was
look
thinking,
at this, everybody. Look, something bad's happening.
I was just worried about your blood pressure. I know that you don't like this mild peril.
I watched it in bed, so it was all right. I was laid down.
Good. Okay. We can relax.
I could relax, absolutely. Back in the hotel, we're back in the reception. Basil's putting the picture up, or trying to, when the phone rings. And Basil's busy shouting, "Can somebody get the phone?" And then Manuel comes flying out the kitchen, so excited about the prospect of answering the hotel phone. And Basil shouts, "Not you!"
Yeah.
Then Basil picks up the phone, the usual phone at reception that he thinks he's ringing. So he's put the picture down. He was mid putting the picture up, puts the picture down, heads over to answer the phone, and it's the wrong phone. And then the other phone that's on the reception is still ringing, and then Sybil answers it, which got my back up. Just answer the phone.
I don't think she's as bad in the next few episodes. I think it's just set in the scene that she is a thorn in his side with her behaviour and her expectations.
Polly's back from the high street, all flustered, in need of talking to Basil. She needs to speak to Mr. Fawlty.
You get this a lot in a lot of episodes. She needs to speak to him urgently and he won't listen.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of time. I mean, that's the farce of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sort of miscommunication The Major is in the bar and he's having a bit of a chit-chat with Basil. They all sort of come down for drinks, don't they, before the dinner, which is something that it still happens.
It still does happen,
to the hotel bar.
But what I like about the Major is he's a bit like some of Larby and Esmond's weird characters in The Good Life, in that he just comes out with weird random lines like...
Random chat.
Did you know the female gibbon gestates for 7 months? Fawlty's like, does he really? It's like clearly like...
But do you know, as a hotelier, you must have to just put up with that kind of stuff all the time. Just people chit-chatting.
Yeah.
And telling you random information. I'd be awful at that. I'd be awful at being a hotelier.
Yes, I don't think I'd have the patience. I don't think I'd be as impatient as Basil, but I'm not cut out for it, certainly. And certainly when that guy comes in wanting his gin and orange scotch and lemon.
So the family that were turfed off Lord Melbury's table come in.
Yeah.
And the dad of the family immediately asks, is there anywhere that we shouldn't sit?
Yeah.
Because obviously he doesn't want to get thrown off another table. He just wants to sit down and he orders his drinks and then finds somewhere to sit. Lord Melbury comes in and has a dry sherry and Basil says, what else? So obviously he's got Lord Melbury on a pedestal throughout this episode. He thinks that he's the bee's knees. He is the clientele that Fawlty Towers needs. He spots Lord Melbury looking through his coin collection, does Basil, which is at sort of like the back of the bar. And they're all British Empire. And Lord Melbury sort of suggests that Basil should get these valued for what they're worth now. And because it's something that he needs to look after.
It's a transparent con to the viewer, isn't it? We can see it coming. But, I mean, this is it. We see it coming. I think most people in the show, if you were saying it to Sybil or Polly, they'd see it coming, but Basil's so preoccupied with the perceived class of Lord Melbury that he's willing to hand over the coins, isn't he?
Absolutely. He gets drawn in with just patter. He gets drawn in by it because apparently Lord Melbury's going to be having dinner with the Duke of Buccleuch, who works at Sotheby's, or he's got connections with Sotheby's, and he can take the coins with him and get them valued if Basil wants, which Basil thinks he's like, yeah, absolutely. He's ready to hand them over. Polly is still in desperate need of speaking to Basil and finally pins him down to have a quick chat with him to tell him that Lord Melbury is in fact a confidence trickster and that she'd seen Mr. Brown on the high street, who is actually from the CID. So he's not this Cockney wide boy.
No.
He's actually there to try and catch Lord Melbury. He's at the hotel for that very reason, which obviously Basil does not want to believe. He doesn't want to think that Mr. Brown is anybody and that Lord Melbury is a confidence trickster.
I think the fact that it came from Mr. Brown makes him even more incredulous that this could be how could someone as common as Mr. Brown possibly be telling the truth? You know?
Yeah.
Just utter snobbery.
With his leather jacket. Sybil gets the cases out when she finds out this news, and they open it up, and it's just got bricks in it.
It's a great reveal, though, isn't it? Because all the time Basil's like, I forbid you to take that case out. I forbid you to open it. And he keeps forbidding her, and she keeps just doing what she wants. And then when she opens it, puts it in front of him, we don't see. For about 3 or 4 seconds, we just see him staring, and then he just lifts up the bricks, and it becomes apparent he's got bricks, and then he starts smelling them.
He smells them and clanks them together, doesn't he? Just to make sure that they're not like golden bricks inside. Yeah.
As if like his olfactory senses is going to reveal that it's in fact not bricks, that it's a mirage, and there's actually tons of gold bullion in there or something.
He's very deflated. And then the couple that did reply to the advert, the Morrises, Sir Richard and Lady Morris, turn up. Lord Melbury comes down the stairs, and at this point, obviously, Basil is aware that Lord Melbury is in fact a confidence trickster, and he gives Basil another cheque to cash, which Basil he bites it and throws it away. And the couple just stand there looking absolutely flummoxed at the behaviour of this hotelier.
Well, initially he's just befuddled, isn't he? He's only just got the shock about the bricks, and he goes out and he doesn't really know what's going on. And I think his acting's really good in this, because even halfway through his sentence, he's suddenly distracted and he sort of grimaces and sort of, do you know what I mean? He's like, oh, fucking Melbury. But he's just totally distracted. But then when Melbury appears, he can't keep it in, can he? As well as biting a check, he's going, you bastard! And chasing him around the hotel.
He's brilliant. I think the comic genius of John Cleese and the creation of the character of Basil in this particular scene, I think it's just, you can just be in awe of it, I think.
Yeah, it all comes together at that point, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
He says to Lord Melbury, about my priceless collection of coins. The Duke of Buccleuch's dead.
Yeah.
He got his head knocked off by a golf ball.
How are you, me old mucker? And starts slapping him around the face.
Slaps his face. So the fact that he's turned on a sixpence completely, and he asked the couple, he asked the Morrises, have you got any valuables? Do you have any bricks? At which point, Lord Melbury legs it literally off the screen. Basil shouts after him, "You bastard!" Manuel and Polly at this point step in and they trip him up, and Basil gets his wallet off him.
He gets a boot in first, doesn't he?
Gives a bit of a good hiding as well while he's down there.
Like that, and he gets his 200 quid back.
He does. Lord and Lady Morris leave, and Basil chases them and asks them what they're doing, and they say, "We're leaving." Obviously, they're absolutely blown away by the incompetence of this place, and head off. To which Basil shouts after them, "You snobs," which is quite ironic.
Yeah.
As Lord Melbury's sort of manhandled out of the hotel by Mr. Brown and the other members of the CID, Basil wants to just give him one last punch as he's being taken down the steps, but they won't let him. We head back inside the hotel. Basil dusts himself off and heads back inside. And the family that had been ditched off the table are still waiting for the drinks. A gin and tonic, a lemon squash, and a scotch and water, please. To which point, Basil smashes the picture and the episode ends.
But he's literally grabbing the guy. I keep thinking of him as Thomas Dolby. The dad of the family. He's literally like dragging him through to the bar.
Yes.
It's the OTT-ness, isn't it? It's one thing having a rude hotelier. It's another having one who's literally pulling you around the hotel.
Yes.
That's a lot of physical comedy in Fawlty Towers, and it's always very well done. Well, no, it's 95% very well done. We do get some scenes which look ridiculous, which we'll see in future episodes. But in this one, spot on, I think. Yeah.
And the Polly and Manuel characters sort of stepping in that kind of like farcical sitcom way of stopping. Yeah, they're just in the right place at the right time to stop the mania that's going on.
Yes, yeah. To make sure it's not such a catastrophic ending as it could have been.
Mm.
One interesting thing about this was that, as we said earlier, this came out in September 1975.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird the way sitcom world works, I suppose. But unbeknownst to Cleese and Booth when they were writing this, I'm sure, and similarly unbeknownst to the writers of Rising Damp, they were writing exactly the same plot, exactly the same time, because barely 3 months later, in fact less than 3 months later, Rising Damp transmitted pretty much the identical storyline in an episode of Rising Damp called The Perfect Gentleman. I know you've not seen Rising Damp particularly.
Wow!
But you know Rigsby, Leonard Rossiter's character? He's basically similarly taken in by an upmarket con man who comes to his door. Exactly the same thing almost broadcast within months of each other. It's crazy,
really?
eh?
I wonder if something had been in the news sort of around that time, like where that had actually happened somewhere, and they'd all just gone off and written their version of it, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe there was like a prompt, like a social prompt.
There was a muse who was making them all, giving them all ideas.
Yes.
A con man muse.
Yeah.
So there we go. That's the end of our very first run-through of the very first episode of Series 1 of Fawlty Towers. We mentioned, didn't we, last week, that we're not going to do MVPs.
No.
Because it'll always be Polly. She's the only one who's got any competence or likability. So instead of MVP, what we thought we'd do was, we thought this week and every week in the Fawlty Towers run, we'd do a new feature called Bric-a-Brac Spotlight.
So each week we will be taking some piece of the 1970s sitcom set. So this time, obviously, it's Fawlty Towers. And pick something that stands out to us as being an item that you could pinpoint in that episode as sort of representing the time, the era, the show, just something that stands out. So obviously we're watching it independently of each other, and there's different things that stand out to both of us. So we need to, so we're going to pick one thing that sticks out, that's not one of the actors. So it's nothing to do with the performances. It's more to do with the set pieces, the items that are part of the TV set. Yeah,
set decoration that is just representative of the time, isn't it? Yeah, that you wouldn't see now, and it gives us a warm sense of nostalgia to look at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What have you got this week?
I've chosen this week. I had a list of different things that I spotted. I'm just going to go for something quite generic this week, and that is the rotary phone on the reception desk, because it's not something that you would see any longer. You don't really see telephones, landlines in people's homes anymore. So
no, true.
The rotary telephone, for me, it's like a good exhibit of that era, and something that I've got a connection with as a kid as well. And I chose it because it obviously it's different now. With like my kids have no idea what a rotary phone is. When you talk about a phone that you pick the handle up and put to your ear, and you didn't just push buttons, you had to turn the dial on it.
It's mad, really, isn't it? That they even designed it that way. It took about 3 weeks
to make a phone call. Yeah, really an odd concept, really.
I used one summer I phoned the Everton club line, like the 0898 numbers that charge you a fortune. When the internet didn't exist when I was a kid, and I wanted the latest transfer news.
The news.
3 times a day I was phoning this 0898 number to get the latest transfer news, and they always keep you on 5 minutes going, late, coming up, later in, and you're like, so at the end of the summer, there was like a £200 bill that I had to pay.
I bet there was.
And not only does it baffle me that no one caught me doing this in all this time, it baffles me particularly that no one heard me constantly using the rotary dial on a thing.
Absolutely, because it wasn't a silent process, was it?
No.
It was so loud when you turned the dial on it. And the ring of a rotary telephone as well was like nothing I've ever heard. It's like a noise that would wake the dead when a rotary telephone goes off. Quite shrill, and I've just got that image. It's like an audio image in my head, if that makes sense, of this phone. Every time the phone rang, I don't know how we all didn't just have like mild coronaries, because it would wake the dead. I don't know about you, but my phone now, it's never ever on ring, ever. It's not even on vibrate.
Very rarely.
If I see it, it's because it's in front of me. If I see it ringing, so the idea of having a phone in the house now that could ring at any time just fills me with absolute peril.
My parents had one right next to the bed as well.
Oh my God. Oh, that's giving me mild palpitations, the thought of that. Yeah, it's just... So it was definitely of a time, and to hear it, it's quite nostalgic hearing it, but it just made me remember that it's not something I would ever want in my house.
I just remembered as well, because my nan was... You've met my nan, have you? I can't remember. Did you ever meet my nan? Yeah, you would have done.
Yeah, I think so.
She was deaf, and in her flat, not only did she have a treble volume ring, God. It also... She had it hooked up to this fucking siren light that went off.
Yeah.
Like lighting up the room. It was like it was almost like the air raid was coming or something when it I wouldn't like to have lived upstairs from her. Bloody hell.
Oh dear. What did you pick for yours then? What was your sort of set piece that you identified?
So I picked the barometer that's on the wall in the lobby just by the stairs.
Yes.
When I was a kid, my nana and granddad had one of those, which they swore worked. But it always seemed to be predicting the same weather to me.
Yes. Yeah.
They would swear blind that it was working, and that this was what was coming. And I was like, this thing's been stuck on windy for 7 years. But anyway, when they died, it ended up in our house, so it was in my mum and dad's house, and I'm pretty sure they've still got it. I'm pretty sure, and I may be wrong, and my dad might listen to this episode and correct me, but I think it might be mine now, but I've just never been able to get it over here to New Zealand because of the size of it. I'm pretty sure he said I could have it, and then we worked out, and I think he said he'd leave it to me or something. Nice. A broken barometer.
Do you think in New Zealand it'd show 4 seasons in one day?
Oh, very good, very good. It would have its work cut out in New Zealand, I tell you that.
Just spinning round.
Yeah. That'd wake the fucker up. been 100 years since it's moved, it would be like, what the fuck's this?
Oh, where have you brought me?
Yeah, so I did like that, and it looked very much like my parents / my barometer. Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of bric-brac. Hang on a minute, let me say that again.
No, I'm not editing it. It's staying like this.
What's it called? Bric-a-brac.
Bric-a-brac spotlight. Yeah, bric-a-brac
So
spotlight.
that brings us neatly to the end of bric-a-brac. Oh, bloody hell.
I'm not editing it. It's staying like this, Al.
No! So that brings us neatly to the end of bric-a-brac spotlight for the first week.
Very neatly.
Neatly, like a pair of pinking shears.
Consummately, professionally.
Cut so neatly.
So let's revert to type and do an old favourite and have a little trip over to Al's fashion corner.
Well, it's time to take a little trip to the place that long ago was hip. It's fashion corner. It's fashion corner. It's fashion corner. Fashion corner. Oh. Lots to talk about in this episode. I feel a bit bereft now, like you said before, that there's no Margot to chat about. However, I do feel I can. Yeah, I've got Sybil as a replacement. I think in this episode we see her in. It's a beautiful plum purple coloured suit jacket and skirt with a white blouse underneath with like a neckerchief over the top. Very sort of late 70s looking. And I didn't realise how sort of petite she actually was.
Yeah.
She looked really tiny in what she was wearing. But the colour was very, very sort of like without obviously 70s prints were still a big deal around that time, but the block colours towards the end of the 70s, it felt like it was heading in that direction. Very neat, very, very sober, very professional looking, but still looking really well put together. She obviously knows style and she knows how she wants to look.
She's very frilly though, isn't she? She's very frilly.
She is very frilly. The neckerchief's very frilly. I do want to make a point of mentioning Sybil's hair as well. I know that's not fashion, but Sybil's hair.
I think it falls under the
I do have hair envy of Sybil because she's got this sweeping grey streak at the front.
Yeah.
In what looks like it's like an updo with like a French twist, but she's got quite wavy hair, but with this very slick grey streak at the front, which I also rock with jet black hair. But I always admire women that have got some kind of grey on show. I always think there's a bit of a power and a bit of action woman behind someone that's got a grey streak.
See, I've always thought of her hair as beehive, but I don't suppose it is beehive really, is it?
I think it less a beehive. It's more like a twist at the back. But I know what you mean. It's quite high on top, isn't it? It's got quite a lot of lift.
Yeah.
But the grey streak, I just think, yeah, she looks cool. She does. Basil, at this stage, because Basil obviously he's got this brown suit on. It's quite a sober looking brown suit. It's also for looking with that professional look of someone that owns a hotel. However, his face is so pale and his hair is so messy that he just looks like a manic smart man. He looks like he's trying to give off vibes of knowing what he's doing with what he's wearing. His height and his gait and his face just give away the fact that he's just on the edge constantly, isn't he? He really is.
Yeah. I think the one thing that stands out as looking a bit ropey in his attire is that tiny tie he's got. You know,
yes.
I mean, it doesn't have to be tiny, but the way he's got it, it's like an Oliver Hardy or a reverse Donald Trump. Donald Trumps are always too long, aren't they?
Yeah, is it to exacerbate his height and to sort of make him look even bigger because of
maybe
the small tie?
That'd be a decision,
is it a comic? It could be like a comic
device.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. That'd be interesting. I bet there's so many interviews with John Cleese about making the Fawlty Towers that I bet he reveals that at some point if it's true.
Mr. Brown from the CID. Obviously, we said that we would chat about him because of his his biker jacket, which was like a black leather jacket with red and yellow stripes around the arms and around the collar. That's something that I think that leather jacket is of a time, but equally as timeless, because you'd see that in like Topshop, I'm sure, over the recent decade.
Did you think it looked potentially PVC-ish rather than leather?
I think like a mock leather.
Yeah.
Pleather.
That's what they call it now, yeah. But
Pleather.
I don't know, there was just something sheeny about it that made me think, is that real leather?
Perhaps it wouldn't have been leather. Perhaps it would have been like a man-made material.
Yeah, and maybe that fed into Basil's view of him as just being a chancer.
Perhaps. And a black polo neck. Mr. Brown looked cool. I think he looked really smart. And I think now that you know that he's a copper undercover, I think it's quite clear really that he's obviously trying to pitch himself so that you wouldn't think he was a copper undercover. But I think his attire does give him away a little bit when you know a little bit more. I wanted to mention Polly in Fashion Corner because I think she just deserves some kind of mention. But she's very muted, isn't she? When you compare her to sort of Sybil, she's got, it's a very 1970s, almost like a mid-century green. She's in like a very, very dark green outfit.
She seems quite beige to me.
There's nothing spectacular about what she's wearing at all, is there?
No.
It's not very naughty. In fact, if you'd have asked me beforehand what will Polly have on, I wouldn't have known. She sort of just blends into the background. But I think, is that part of the character, do you think? She's not really supposed to stand out.
Well, this is the first episode, but I think in most episodes she's wearing that poly dress, isn't she? That blue and white poly dress. The only thing in this one that caught my eye with Polly was when she was serving breakfast to Mr. Brown was she had a big collar, a big floppy collar on, which I thought was quite nice. But yeah, she was very muted. And I think maybe it was all about establishing Sybil and Basil's dynamic, and she was very much a bit part in this one. Yeah,
just hidden in the background, really.
Yeah.
Apart from swooping in to stop Lord Melbury.
Yeah, well, she was very nervous, I think, and she was finding her way into the role. So I think she grows and becomes more central to it as it goes on. But you're right, there was nothing to write home about fashion-wise, was there, with Polly?
No.
Says me like I'm some sort of fashion expert.
Lord Melbury had, I was wanting to mention his like woolen coat that he had on, which again was like an identifier, wasn't it? We were supposed to look at Lord Melbury and go, that's a man with class, that's a man with power, and to hold him in high esteem because he looked like just very smart looking. Like you said before, when you see him, from what he's wearing, the suit and the long coat, you're supposed to draw from that he's somebody of importance.
You are supposed to draw that, but I just thought maybe it's because I knew, I've seen this episode countless times, but I just thought he looked like an archetypal cad.
Yeah.
He had cad written all over him.
Yeah. On first viewing, though, perhaps you would.
Yes. Difficult to know, isn't it, when you've seen it so many times?
It is, isn't it? It is. I think you'd have to be quite naive to not think in a sitcom that somebody that's dressed like that is actually going to cause some bother.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But on first viewing, I think you're supposed to think, here's a smart man. That's it for Fashion Corner this week.
So obviously that's our first episode done, but if you'd like to follow along with us and get involved and look at some of the rare videos and images that we post on our social media channels, you can follow us at SADDO Podcast on Twitter and on Instagram. We have a Facebook page you can find by searching SADDO Podcast, and we also have a growing Facebook group that you can join and contribute to the discussion with memes or rarities that you might find yourself and want to share with our growing community. And if you do join the Facebook group, you'll get a say on what season 3 is going to be all about, because we're going to put it to the vote. So it's worth doing if you're really desperate to see us deep dive Porridge, Rising Temp, Reggie Perrin, whatever you fancy. Subscribe to our newsletter by visiting our website, saddo.club, where you can also get more information about the project, read our blog posts, shout us a coffee if you like, or listen to episodes if you don't do podcast apps. You can also, as we mentioned earlier, watch the original episodes we discuss on each episode notes page. You can email us if you're old school, you want to go email route, you can email us at saddopodcast@gmail.com. Send a carrier pigeon to Torquay, reach us that way. And subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes wherever you get your podcasts.
Next week, we will be deep diving again, but with the second episode of the first series of Fawlty Towers, and it's called The Builders, where there's some major misunderstanding about what building work needs to be done while the Fawltys are out of town.
I do recall Basil Fawlty wearing some ridiculous clothes in this one for you to have a look at.
Is it golf attire? I think there's some golf attire in this one, isn't there?
That's Sybil mainly, isn't it? But he's just got a ridiculous jacket on and a hat. And O'Reilly steals the show in this one, where he's like, I do love a woman with spirit. I do.
He's very over the top, isn't it? I'm looking forward to this one. I'm looking forward to it loads.
So join us next week, and we'll get stuck into The Builders. Nice to have you with us. Stick with us. If you're not a big fan of Fawlty, we'll be on to something else in about 10 weeks.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Stay with us. Stay with us if you can.
Who's not a fan of Fawlty Towers, though, eh?
Exactly.
You need your head looking at. I'll see thee.
See you next time.
A gin and orange, lemon squash, and a scotch and water pea.